Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, developing your skills, your network, your habits, and more. I'm your host, Aaron Hayslip, and today we're going to be talking to self-taught software engineer Pierre Lebrum. Pierre has been doing web development for over 10 years and is here to share his journey with us and what he believes has led to his success. Pierre, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you being on the podcast. You know, for context, I've never met you before. You told me right before we started the interview here that you're actually on the floor above me, which makes this a little awkward because you would think I would just come out and talk to you. But I realized, as you said, that I've never done a podcast interview with someone that is physically in the same area that I'm in.
Right. If I stomp real hard, maybe you'll hear me down there.
Yeah, I think you're on the other side. I'm on the other side of the building there. But okay, so is that how you say name, Pierre?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. And I saw, and I just poked around on your LinkedIn that at some point you were going to school in France.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit about your background, your journey. Right now, you are a software engineer. How'd you get to where you're at right now?
Sure. It's a little bit of a weird upbringing, but I was born in the States in California, and then at the age of 6, we left. My dad moved to Singapore for a job there, so we'd moved to Singapore for 6 years, and then moved to Cambodia after that for like another 6 years, and that's when I started getting interested in programming. It all started when I was playing this computer hacking simulation game called Uplink by Ambrosia Software. And I think I was like 13 or 14 at the time, but I was like, oh, I love this. I want to be a hacker.
That's cool.
So one thing led to another, and eventually I learned like a little bit of SQL, and then I got an online tutorial book on the C programming language. And then I learned Perl because Mac OS X had just come out at the time, and so that was the first like Unix system that Apple's operating system is based on. And so it came built in with like the command line man pages, and Perl has like pretty good documentation built in. And the context there is, back in the day, there were online coding tutorials, but a lot less than there are today. And also I was on dial-up connection that cost like $1 plus a minute. So I couldn't go online and learn there. So I found Perl, and I learned that it's kind of my first real programming language. And I wrote a bunch of like little games and scripts. I even wrote a little Perl virus that would like copy itself into other Perl files. And I shared that online on like a professional site. This was like some sort of, I forget the name of it, but it was like pre-Stack Overflow, and I got banned from that site because they were like, no, this is no sharing of awesome. That type of content. Anyway, so that's kind of how I got started in programming. And then I ended up going to college in France. My dad is French, so I'm a French citizen. So that was
pretty cool.
Ended up there, did computer science for like 2.5 to 3 years. It wasn't a great fit. It was very math heavy. I was really good at the programming part, but I was really terrible at the math. And the too long didn't read version of that is that I hadn't studied all the math prerequisites in high school because I took a different track, and then for some reason they admitted me to the computer science track in college there, and so I was passing, but it was hard. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So I ended up pivoting and talked to my dad at the time, and I was like, I want to go to school in America. Oh, I'd met my now wife there. She was an international student, so I was like, I want to go to America to study. And he was like, that's expensive. Why don't you go to New Zealand instead? And so that's where I ended up going. I went to the University of Otago in New Zealand to study business because I'd always been interested in like starting entrepreneurship and starting my own business. So I studied management in Otago. I went on exchange to UNC, University of Chapel Hill, Keenan Flagler Business School here, and studied here for like a year. Ended up
No,
it ended up
it's
like
fine. It's real life, man.
picking
This
things so
podcast
that
is
I would
raw.
graduate while I was
It's
in the
not too loud,
States,
actually.
and so I can stay here and not have to go back. Oh, we're lucky. There's a train going by now.
That's right.
Uh, so yeah, so I graduated, started. Yeah, I started my first job
Yeah.
was like as a business analyst. Tell me if I need to stop.
Okay.
Okay.
And did you stop programming like in between? Like whenever you
Okay.
were like a
Loud for
kid
me, but
doing
I guess the
Perl, having fun on the
filtering is
internet,
doing its job.
posting stuff
Uh,
with viruses.
so I'm
Did you
getting around
stop
to the
programming
programming
between
part.
then and like your after computer
I was doing
science
like
the stint?
business analysis, business analyst work for my for one of my professors. I think I did that for like a year. I hated it though. I was like, yeah, yeah. So I probably programmed a little bit between like 15 and 17, like just messing around Perl scripts, nothing web related. And then when I moved to America to do this exchange program at Keenan Flagler, I was like, I needed a job in the summer. And so I didn't end up getting a job in web development, but I did start learning web development and then just like emailing businesses at random on Craigslist and whatever, being like, hey, I can redesign your website, for like $200, whatever. I didn't get any bites because I really didn't know what I was doing in terms of sales. I did eventually do a few freelancing gigs when I was in college. Like I built a website for this company called Everstair. They were selling like a fiberglass stair for multi-unit residential. Um, so I just did like a few websites here and there while I was in school. Got way underpaid because I didn't know the value of things. But hey, that's college. See in Carborough, new media campaigns, and so they
Okay.
gave me my first internship. And at the time, was it was it IE did IE9?
Ooh.
I think it was, yeah. Like as the intern, I got to debug and try to
Oh.
figure out all the IE9 issues,
Yeah.
which is brutal, but it was a good experience.
Well, one of my first jobs, we still supported, like it was like this small. I mean, it was a few years later than that, but it was like a small subset of our users. We had a product was
Yeah,
on IE9, and like I feel like it took up a huge part of my job. Was just making sure everything worked there, and then eventually, like a few months later, we decided to stop supporting it, and it was like such a
yeah,
celebratory moment for me. I was like, finally, I get to like have a whole portion of my job back,
yeah. I for sure. I recently, for the first time in my career, like I'm working on a product where we don't support IE11 or any of the IEs, right?
Yeah.
Now it's dead, and it's great. Although I have my beast now with Safari. So Safari to me is the new IE.
We're getting spoiled.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's leaps and bounds better. But I also work nowadays. I work on a telemedicine product, so we're using some pretty cutting edge, web stuff, and then we're having to support Android, iOS, all the different browsers, mobile
Wow. Okay.
browsers. So it's a lot of browser support. So because it's the combination of like bleeding edge technology and broad browser support, I end up dealing with a lot of like very nitty gritty, sometimes undocumented bugs,
Yeah.
where we just kind of figure out.
So mostly these days you're working in JavaScript, I presume.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't start out that way.
I was just gonna say it's interesting to me because I think if I looked at your, I picked your LinkedIn and I saw in there, some computer science experience. I couldn't tell if you got like the computer science degree or not. And then as you're telling the story, I think a lot of times whenever we hear stories like yours, to be honest, where it's like you're a kid and you're learning programming, folks like me think to ourselves, oh man, it's all over, because as a kid, I wasn't learning programming. And so
Yeah.
I actually thought your story was going to go a different direction, which I find it interesting that like to you, computer science was like not what you thought it was going to be in terms of like, you were like, no, this is math and I'm a
Right.
programmer. And yeah, tell me a little bit about that. Like why, I guess help me reconcile the fact that you didn't get a computer science degree, but you ended up being a, working in like the world of the web with JavaScript. Yet whenever you were 13, I mean, you were programming in Perl. I don't know Perl,
Yeah. Well, nobody does nowadays.
Yeah, right.
It was very popular at the time. I think it had the moniker the chainsaw of the internet or the chainsaw of the web or something. It's kind of a brutal language, but it supported regexes, really well. It sort of pushed that forward. And anyway, it was powerful for its time. Uh, yeah, I mean, I went to computer science. I did a computer science degree because I wanted to like write programs and be a coder and build things, not to study math. And I have a cousin who's like trying to decide what he wants to do with his life. He's like college age, and his main, he keeps on asking me like, I'm not good at math. Like I don't think I can do programming because I'm not good at math. And I'm telling him like, you don't need to be good at math to do programming. You really, really don't.
But you do to get a computer science degree.
You do to get, yeah, exactly. It's, I mean, I've met people with computer science degrees who aren't programmers too. Like, met a designer who had a computer science degree, and like she couldn't program, and she'd say like, yeah, they didn't really teach us that in school. So, yeah, programming. So I went to school for programming a little bit, but I say I'm self-taught because truly everything that I do professionally is self-taught. And I hate traditional like academics and cramming and tests and whatever. I'm more my learning style is more driven just by curiosity and then implementing, doing things, figuring things out. So it's a good.
Well, I love that. I think oftentimes our students have a hard time with our program because they go in like school mode, right? They're used to doing this thing where it's like, all right, if I study enough, if I memorize enough things, then when the test comes, I can ace the test.
Right.
So they want to know like what we do these evals where they basically they have to build projects, and if they get stuck in the project of like how to do the next thing, their gut reaction is to go back and review all of the content.
Yeah.
Hoping that somewhere in there is like the answer, because that's what you would do in school. You're learning for a test. So somewhere in there, like, when this battle happened, the date is somewhere in the material. So you just figure that out. But what happens is they spin their wheels because it's a skill, right? Like you wouldn't go to like a basketball class and read a basketball book, and then when you get to the basketball game, not be able to, shoot a three, and then go study up on like the essence of shooting a three. You would mess around with shooting a three until you're able to shoot a three.
Yeah, for sure. Learning. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it takes a very different mindset to learn programming than it does to go to school. It's interesting. As I mentioned in the pre-interview, I volunteer with Code the Dream, which is like a free code school, and a lot of the students I think struggle with that shift in mindset. Like they're still very much in the like, I don't understand this. Please teach me the content, and then there's a disconnect between like the content they learn and the exercises. Except there isn't, right? The reading the content won't tell you how to do the exercise, but if you understand the concepts from the lesson, then you should be able to do the exercise. But they're used to, I think, the lessons and the tests being, more just directly finding the answers, I guess, directly in the lessons, right? Which
Right.
is not going to be the case.
Yeah, and there's definitely a difference between like scaffolding curriculum in such a way where it's like, we've taught you this, but then also being able to do what you're saying, which is to extract the skill, not necessarily the answer from the problem. Yeah, I was I remember before I became a software engineer, I think I had lunch with a friend who was a software engineer, and I just wanted to know about it. I remember one of the things he told me, which was so true, was like, he was essentially trying to explain to me how the way you think as a software engineer is probably unlike any way that you've thought before, because of the simple fact that like you don't get to persuade the computer. Like whenever I was in school, I have a religious studies degree, and I would write essays. And in some ways, I feel like my essays, like those were my tests, were me persuading the professor to give me a good grade, right? You can just kind of BS your way through it. And then, same thing with computers. Like I think a lot of times when we approach programming, we think, oh, the computer probably knows what I mean. That's the way I see a lot of new developers approaching programming is they assume that this thing is smarter than it actually is. And in reality is you, I mean, it's more powerful than you are, but you are far smarter than the language, right? And you've got to give it every detailed direction on exactly what you want it to do, which in some ways should relieve us, right? That we exercise the power over this, and not vice versa.
Yeah.
Anywho, so all right, quick question for you. I'm curious. This isn't such a huge deal, but when we think about software engineer, at least this is where I was originally. I think a lot of people think about this too. They picture somebody who's writing, executing command line scripts, working on operating systems. The way that I thought of software engineers whenever I was a kid, right? But when I say software engineer to you, I mean, it's web development, right? And I think a lot of people are confused about what web development is. Do you make a distinction between web development, software engineering? I mean, I see on your LinkedIn UI engineer.
Yeah.
What does all that mean?
I mean, a lot of it, wow, you could spin your wheels on those, you could bike shed on those discussions like all day long. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily differentiate between the terms like web developer and software engineer or UI engineer. They're trying to put, I mean, I say UI engineer because I wanted to emphasize the fact that I really enjoy working on user interfaces. And like I'm not professionally trained like developer or in UX, but I read a lot about that stuff and I'm interested in it. So like my interests are around, just creating amazing user experiences, marketing, conversions, just building cool things in general on the web. But I do have a heavy emphasis also on like engineering and architecture and things like that. So I don't like, I mean, there's just such a spectrum, right? You've got developers that are like just working on like marketing websites where you're writing like HTML and CSS. And then you have developers that are working on like medium level complexity, like SaaS products. And then you have people who are working on, more complex problems. I mean, but my train's coming again. So like in my current job, some of the more like complex stuff that I end up working on, I work for Doximity. We have a telemedicine product, and one thing that we support is like virtual backgrounds, like in the browser. So that's a fairly complex thing to do in the browser. And I mean, just doing video, WebRTC and like video audio on the web is like fairly complex. There's a lot of data to manage, state to manage. So there's definitely varying levels of complexity in web development. I
think what I'm getting at is, I think for a few years ago, rather recently, I think people would have thought of web development as someone who writes HTML and CSS, and if you are a JavaScript developer,
right,
it's like you're doing some jQuery stuff. But it seems like, and I think your kind of story paints that picture well, which is, I mean, you started learning things that, like Perl and, do computer science degree and all that. But like the advanced spot that you ended up was on the web. And a majority of our applications these days are on the web. So I'm hoping all that to say that people are viewing these days, web developer and software engineer somewhat synonymous, as like there are, as you pointed out, some really complex, interesting problems to be solved. And, you don't need to be somebody who's writing Java or, whatever else to be considered an actual engineer in this field.
Yeah. and I think once once you get to a certain point where you might be considered like senior, you're just solving more harder problems. Like the boundaries between front end and back end sort of blur. It's all programming, it's all logic and moving data and around. You just as like a front end guy, I just specialize in doing the front end stuff. And dealing with browser discrepancies is a big part of that. But yeah, and I mean, in my career, just to give you a full picture, like I started learning like Perl and C, and then I learned like HTML, CSS with some spattering of jQuery, eventually CoffeeScript when that came around, and then like Backbone, Ember. But I did Ruby on Rails for a long time. For a long time, I was like a Ruby on Rails like full stack developer, which really means more like mostly back end, and then HTML, jQuery,
The Rails way,
sort of. Yeah, the Rails way.
Yeah.
And then eventually I just pivoted into doing more front end UI component development. I just found that more interesting and rewarding. Yeah, I got really lucky at some point in my career. I was working for a smaller company that got acquired by a larger company, and that larger company's strategy was just like go out. It was a public company. Go out and buy all these smaller players in the space, and then try to integrate them all. So like have centralized APIs,
Yeah.
but also a centralized user interface. And so I got to work on a really small team where we were developing the like design system or UI library, and that all these other products would be able to consume. And so that was interesting because like the products were using, everything from React, Vue, Angular to like custom home rolled SPA jQuery framework.
Yeah.
Don't ask me about how that came about.
Yeah.
But so we had to support all of them. So we ended up using web components, which were kind of just coming of age
Yeah.
at the time to do that, with IE 11 support for custom elements at least. And yeah, so that was my first kind of real like front end focus. And
Hey, explain real quick. Explain real quick because I don't think folks are really under. I mean, the language of the frameworks you named are probably pretty common, but what are web components?
So web components are just a browser spec for that allow you to build your own like UI components. Like I mean, like in React, let's say you build like a drop-down component, but in order for that to run, you need like React. You need the React runtime on the page, and React handles like loading that component, all the things. Web components are like they're self-loading components. Or custom elements. Well, custom elements are kind of one part of a four different specs, and all those four specs are web components. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but custom elements gives you the ability to basically custom define your own HTML tags. So you could, define a tag in JavaScript and say, okay, this is my element. And then if somebody were to inject a my element tag in the page, the browser would run your code, initialize that element. You could build out your UI, event handlers, all that stuff. So it's a way to create like third-party components that are framework agnostic.
Yeah. Very cool. No, I think it's a good explanation. As you've been advancing in your career, I see a number of different, obviously companies and roles, and it sounds like you're getting to work on some really amazing things with telemedicine, which I think, hopefully, I'm sure you guys all saw was accelerated by the pandemic.
Yeah.
What skills or character attributes, because it seemed like those things were early on for you, right, whenever you were learning to program, but what kind of things have led you to be the type of person that finds success in self-teaching, or being able to be at a place right now where you're really on the forefront of technology of the web?
Yeah, I mean, it helps to be really curious in general, and I am. I have a lot of interests. Like I'll get into modes where I'm like, oh, I'm really interested in like vermicomposting or organic farming, or even if I don't have an organic farm. So I'll just do like a deep dive and learn all about a topic. So I think loving to learn and natural curiosity really helps. But another thing that helps, and this is not necessarily something that you have at the very beginning, and for me it's something I had to build over time, is just like that confidence that you can learn and figure out anything. Um, so yeah, at this point, if you ask me like, could you do X, Y, Z, build X, Y, Z product? I'd be like, I don't know how to do it now, but I'm sure if I just like invested time and tried it, I could figure it out. Because I've learned that I can learn, and I've learned that I can figure things out, and that uh, I don't know that there's a shortcut like to get there. I think you just have to start. I think, well, I think you have to push yourself. That I've definitely had points in my career where I stagnated for like 1 or 2 years. I probably was like at the same skill level that I was like a year later. And so I think you want to be careful not to stagnate, not to get too comfortable and just do the things that you know how to do. I think it's important to always push yourself. And if you don't know how like drag and drop works on the web, like go and
Yeah.
learn, try to build something there.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good. I mean, not to stop you, but I think it's a good point because I think it's pretty natural. I feel like for even those, because I consider myself curious too. I'm resident trivia player in my house and random fact guy, and I think that partly leads to being able to pick up different software engineering techniques pretty quickly. But I think that it's natural for you to go in and out of cycles of where you get excited about something and you spend energy on it, and then you kind of just it fizzles out, and then you get excited about it again.
Yeah.
And I think part of being a software engineer is that affects your career. Those seasons where you're not curious or excited about what you're doing are usually, like you're saying, the seasons where you kind of just stay even and plateau. But I love what you're saying about you right now. Like you're at a point where you have the confidence of, hey, I don't know everything. I don't need to know everything. But if there was something that I wanted to know or that I needed to know, then I'd be able to tackle that. And I think that's like part of this process of overcoming the imposter syndrome, which I think never fully goes away. But I think that's an encouragement to newer developers that like at some point that really does happen, right? Where as you go along, and it takes like you're saying, I think just those experiences, you have to have a history under your belt of, I didn't know that. I remember a time when I didn't know that, and then I knew it. And if you do that enough over and over again, then hopefully you're at a place in your career like you are, where it's, I've got confidence that whatever I need to learn to do the job, I can do that, which I think is pretty incredible. All right, so you said that, then I cut you off.
No, I agree. I think the opposite of imposter syndrome is exactly that. There's the confidence that even if you don't know, you can know, and you right, because nobody knows everything, and that's one of the cool things about web development or software engineering. There's so many things you can specialize in or get into, and no one person can know it all. And I've definitely felt that imposter syndrome. I think a big thing that you have to let go of, and this seems pretty prevalent in developers a lot, is just like big egos, or like maybe you're trying to like counter that imposter syndrome with your ego. And I don't think that's helpful. I think like even if you know a lot, don't assume. Just always have the curiosity of a beginner, and just admit what you don't know. And because the first step to learning something is admitting that you don't know it. Right?
Yeah.
And
but you need to learn it. Yep.
Yeah. I do. This is kind of shifting topics a little, but I do a lot of interviews. Like for my company, we hire people, and it's interesting, like the difference between when you interview someone who has a little less experience or is more on the junior scale, and someone on more on the senior scale. The main difference that I see is just their ability to explain and talk about concepts in detail. Whereas like a junior developer might know the same things that the senior developer knows. Like they can only explain it in very broad terms. Whereas a senior developer, I think where they're thinking about these concepts, they can probably visualize like all the little micro steps, of a concept that makes up the broader concepts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I think that's super helpful. I haven't heard anyone explain it like that, where it's you're able to go a little bit deeper. And we try not to like get on what we do. But, one of the things that really piss off our students about our program, and I think it's probably come up in almost every podcast interview we've talked about, but we teach Backbone first before learning React. And even before that, we start kind of more or less building our own MVC framework. And the hope there is, a lot of what senior developers have, if you're talking about the world of front end development specifically, is history and experience, right? Like you're telling the story about you were there before, React or Vue came about. And part of the advantage you have is not just the experience of, you built other things or you knew things, but you knew the context, right? And there was a context like in the world of web development where developers were creating products and we were looking for the best tool to help us do the job and build the products that we're trying to build for the companies. And, Backbone was it. Backbone was the best tool. And then as we did that over a number of years, we experienced some common headaches with Backbone and that we were all frustrated by. And then suddenly React came about. And, you could argue, React is, only got popular because of Facebook and yada, yada. But to be honest, React solved some of those problems, like those pain points that we felt with Backbone. And so I think having that context of feeling the pain and knowing not only like, okay, cool, this is a component in React. If I change the prop, it re-renders, right? Which is a lot of like what coding boot camps or online tutorials teach you. If you understand the context behind it, which is like, oh, I know why those who made React like this, then I think that kind of gets into the deeper level of beginning to connect the dots that, okay, if it's like this in this area, right, front end frameworks, then there's probably that same thing because ultimately what we're doing in software engineering is we're building products that solve business problems. Right. And business problems are, there's categories, there's user problems, it's technology, but there's some kind of context that can probably explain the deeper connecting points of this thing. Someone didn't just sit down one day and, like writing a song, dream up something with some God inspired inspiration. There are
things that are created
reasons
that way tend to fail because things that are invented in a vacuum that don't solve any problems aren't valuable. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it too much, but that seems like a very hard thing to teach in the context of a class, right? Because like you can be taught something and then you can like feel it in your gut, right? And be like, oh man, I felt the pain of like trying to manage my state and like putting it into the DOM in data attributes with jQuery, and so or like re-rendering the DOM or updating the DOM. So like, oh, I get why Backbone and having like render functions is extremely valuable. And then you do Backbone a bunch and you're like, wow, something like Vue or React comes out and you're like, oh, I understand why this is valuable. Or I guess Angular was kind of the first version. Because it's like, I'm writing so much boilerplate that's basically just doing the same thing. Now I have a better abstraction to do it. It's great. And then now, like the next stage, right, I think is like server-side rendering or static rendering, where you're like, okay, I've written like I love using React and things to build things, but there's like performance issues and loading issues and all those things. And so now we have like server-side rendering or static rendering that can help with those issues. And then you're like, oh, this is why this is helpful. But
the pain is part of the process. And when you're learning something, if you ever learned how to like skateboard or snowboard or something, the biggest learning jumps happen whenever you eat it. If you're snowboarding down a mountain, to be very careful of your toe side, because falling forward or falling backwards down the mountain is the last thing you want to do. All right, just a couple more things I want to ask you, man. So you volunteer with Code the Dream, which is amazing. So for a little bit of context, Code the Dream there's a local nonprofit, especially invested in immigrants learning to code. At least that was kind of their initial vision. I think that's still mostly where they're at, right?
Yeah, underrepresented communities. So people who are just less commonly seen in tech.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember originally there was maybe that's why I don't have the latest update. They were overseen by a different nonprofit that was focused on immigrants. So unrepresented. Okay, that's awesome. So what has like led you to like want to get involved, and what does your involvement there look like?
So I've been involved kind of just on and off as a volunteer, like for a long time, not and mostly as a mentor. So just like helping students work through problems or understand concepts. I've given a few like talks on various subjects. Like the last talk I gave was about like how to ask good questions, like to get help faster. And then before that, we built like a little whack-a-mole game in CodePen, like in 45 minutes. That was I felt like it was fun because the students were like, wow, like 45 minutes from scratch you can build something, that seems like, that does something, beyond like print text or whatever. Uh, yeah, I mean, I just believe in their vision, like of making, there's no reason that, I think there's no reason that more people, can't learn to code and get into the tech industry, other than some sort of systemic barriers that exist. And so we have to try to overcome those. Both my parents are immigrants, but my dad is like immigrant from France. Just he worked for Apple. It's just kind of a work thing. But my mom was a immigrant from like Cambodia. She was running away from the Khmer Rouge and ended up in the United States. So I have a heart for just people who are immigrants in general, people who are coming here. I'm like first generation American. Yeah. So I find that I really enjoy teaching. Something that I started just now I'm working on is doing like courses. So I'm developing a course right now on like JavaScript tracking user behavior in the browser. So like how Google Analytics would work and whatever. Just because I had a little experience working on a product like that, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I didn't know about it before, and so I'm like, I want to learn more about this and more of the edge cases. So I'm going to actually develop a course while learning kind of more of the hard corners, so that I can learn and then I can teach others. Maybe.
Man, I feel like that's been my secret sauce. Is not knowing something so much that I don't remember knowing it myself. Like that. I think some of the best curriculum and teaching comes out of that, like where you're kind of learning it as you teach it, because you remember the specific hangups and struggles that come with like the first exposure.
Yeah, I mean, I think good teaching is about empathy and understanding where the other person's like struggles are, the concepts they don't understand. So if you're in that place yourself, you're in a great position.
Yeah.
to teach.
Well, man, I don't want to keep you. Last question here would be for you. Like where do you hope to go next in your career? You're working on some complex problems. You're developing courses. Like, what's that next kind of milestone of interesting problems that you'd want to work on?
Yeah. I mean, I've had an interesting career. I've worked for like large public companies, like tiny startups where I was the only engineer, consulting companies, product companies. I work at Doximity now. I really love this team and this company, so I'm probably going to stick around for a while. But I think after that, like I said, I'm kind of working on this one course right now. I'd like to just be self-employed, whether that's developing and selling my own products or courses, or maybe doing consulting, freelancing ish. I would only do that if I could work on just interesting projects that I want to work on, not kind of rely on it for survival and feeding my family. But I think that's where I want to be next, so that I can focus on, I have young kids, 3 and 5, and I'd like to stay at home dad more, and maybe just take my family and travel the world.
I love that. Well, Pierre, man, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. It was good to talk to you. Super interesting to hear about your story. I'm glad we got to connect, and we'll definitely have to get together since we're in the same building here.
Yeah, I'm around today. Oh, you have a lot of meetings though. But
well, right after that, we'll stay on. I want to chat a little bit if that's cool.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, then. Thanks. Well, that does it for this episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about our online code school, Parsity, visit parsity.io. That's parsity.io. We'll see you back here next week for another episode of Develop Yourself.